these ladies that there are opportunities in the STEM field. A couple of years ago, our Chief Diversity Officer with AT&T established a Women's Leadership Council, and recently that Women's Leadership Council went through a process of just kind of inventorying the women of AT&T and some of those accomplishments. And so what I'm showing you here on the screen is some of those facts about the women of AT&T. And there's just a few of those that I'd like to highlight. We run a global network. You're all very familiar with that. Well, there's over nearly 27,000 women involved in running that global network, and many of them hold key senior leadership positions. For example, in Atlanta, the head of all of the installation repair, one of the largest regions in terms of the workforce that's made up, is run by a female. A second thing that we're very proud of, if you look at the nation, the U.S. as a whole, 27% of the STEM positions are held by women, and AT&T, it's 28%. Innovation is a key area of focus for us. We have something we call the Innovation Pipeline, or TIP for short. And it's a crowdsourcing solution where any employee can input an idea, and then the crowd either attacks or helps that particular idea, and it continues to grow, and there's an opportunity for some of those top ideas to be selected for things that we fund to develop and put into the marketplace. And over 7,000 of those TIP ideas have come from women. And then if you look at innovations further, there are over 4,000 patents that have been filed on behalf of AT&T from some 728 women. And there's one woman that has over 100 patents. And that woman is not me. I'm very, very, very close to Marion's number. I'm just a real low 3-digit number behind her. But anyway, in the CTO organization, I have responsibility for the network technologies, and Marion Croak has responsibility for our services and platform technologies. And last year, she received her 100th patent. So, pretty amazing achievement. I just wanted to spend a few minutes then covering with you some of the trends that we're seeing in the wireless industry in terms of those things that are taking off. And I would say that over the last several years, we've been seeing an incredible pace of change. I know that I'm right here in Big D, but for me, the Big D is devices and data. And those are the things that we're driving constantly. When you look at what's happening in terms of the globe, the U.S., we've reached 55% of our customers who are carrying smartphones, not just those feature phones with that lovely 12-digit dial pad on it. And we're seeing that in this year, we would anticipate that over 120 million tablets will be connected to the network. We're also seeing huge increase. All of you in this room are spending 11 hours a month streaming video services onto your tablets and your smartphones, etc. And over the last year, we've seen since 2007, we've seen a 30,000%, see, I can't even say it, growth in our wireless data services. So let's take a little bit of time and focus on each one of these in terms of what that means specifically to AT&T. So if you look at the 55%, that's what the nation as a whole has in terms of smartphone penetration. But as you know, AT&T has been a leader in this particular area, and over 70% of our postpaid customers utilize smartphones. In the fourth quarter alone, we sold 10.2 million smartphones. That's 100,000 devices every day that we were activating on our network. And over 89% of our postpaid customers now carry a smartphone. That's been a significant shift since 2005, when we initially launched our first mobile broadband services, a technology called HSPA+, 2007, when we introduced the iPhone, and now we see a very broad array of devices and capabilities that are continuing to grow substantially. All right, Forrester predicts that this year there will be 120 million tablets added to the network. And again, AT&T has a leadership role in this. In the fourth quarter of last year, we sold 40,000 devices across all different OSs, iPads, Androids, Windows, all of those in our postpaid area. And then, if you look at e-readers, we are pretty much the exclusive activator of e-readers, and that's not just in the US, but around the globe. When you activate your e-reader, that has an AT&T SIM and technology inside of it. So a significant growth that we're seeing. And over the next 4 years, we would anticipate that there will be a 93% growth in this particular area as well. All right, another one of those big D things, and that is the growth of data. 30,000% growth since 2007. So think about DFW. What if that was a 30,000% increase in takeoff and landings over the last 5 years? Or I was thinking last night as I was trying to get to the airport to here, what if you had a 30,000% growth on 635? I'd still be out there. So I sort of think that if you wandered around at the Texas Department of Transportation and you ran into the head of planning transportation, if they had a 30,000% growth, he or she would probably have a lot of gray hair. What do you think? Did I mention I was blonde 6 years ago? So anyway, how have we dealt with that massive growth? Well, we've dealt with that by essentially integrating 2 wireless broadband networks. That HSPA network that we deployed in 2005, we've continued to enhance that and expand that so that it now covers more than 288 million population across the US. And then beginning in 2011, we began overlaying another technology, LTE, or long-term evolution. Yes, engineers named it. And so we began implementing that technology, which gives us even higher throughput speeds and more spectral efficiency. And so we've built both of those networks over the last several years and continue to expand the coverage that they have. And at the same time, we've converted that backhaul, that connectivity from the cell site to the network to Ethernet, so that 93% of the wireless data traffic that we handled in December of last year is handled over that Ethernet connectivity, or all IP connectivity. And at the same time, we've done our implementation and our architecture in such a way that our speeds and throughput speeds and latency in our wireless network continues to receive several awards, including PC World's measurement, and continues to be rated very highly when it comes to those capabilities in the wireless network across the nation. And one of the drivers that we continuously see growing in this particular area is that video content, that 11 hours a month that you all are spending looking at various videos on your smartphones and your tablets, etc. And this has caused an opportunity for us, our own UVerse customers, our IPTV application. We have added those capabilities to where now you can stream your HBO or your Cinemax or Stars to your wireless capabilities as well. So we're seeing a significant growth on a go-forward basis, and we would anticipate a significant growth in that regard. So how are we addressing that? Well, in November of last year, we announced what we called Project VIP, or Project Velocity IP. And it's a significant investment, an $8 billion incremental investment that we will be making over the next 3 years to expedite the implementation of IP across our networks. A portion of that is the expansion of our LTE. We exited 2012 with over 170 million US population covered with that technology. By the end of this year, that'll be 250 million. And by the end of next year, we'll substantially complete our coverage in the US with over 300 million population covered. And at the same time, we also went through a process in the course of 2012 to find incremental spectrum. The U.S. is challenged in terms of the spectrum, that air interface that we have available to us to deploy those technologies on. That's the lifeblood of a wireless company. Well, there was a spectrum allocation that was primarily used for fixed wireless. It's called WCS. It's in the 2.3 gigahertz, which is right next to your Sirius XM radio that you're listening to in your car. And so we saw that as an opportunity to get the rules changed on that spectrum so that it could be used for mobility as well. So we worked directly with Sirius XM to put together a proposal that went jointly to the FCC that resolved some of their concerns about the challenges of utilizing that spectrum for LTE. And in October of last year, the FCC approved that. And so now we're in the process of driving the effort through the standards organization. And we'll be driving the infrastructure and the device technologies to be able to support that as well. So introducing another 30 megahertz of spectrum that can be utilized for wireless technology in the US. The other way that you keep up with that demand is continuously investing. With wireless technologies, you have a limited amount of spectrum, so the only way you can add capacities is the technologies that I talked about, or what we call cell splitting or densification. So if this building is being served by 3 cell sites, put a 4th one in there and then reconfigure those other 3s so that you're increasing the capacity with which you're serving them. So for the part of Project VIP, over the next 3 years, we'll add another 10,000 macro cell sites to our already existing nearly 60,000 sites. And we're also driving what's called a new technology, or small cell. For years, we have done that cell splitting on a vertical basis, and we'll continue to do that, but also begin to do that cell splitting on a horizontal basis. So we've begun our technology proof of concepts and development on this small cell technology. It's a very, very small unit, lower power, less capacity, but you use it to cover a specific building or a specific convention center or a specific one-block area to drive incremental capacity, incremental coverage in a smaller area. We started those trials late last year. And we'll be adding LTE and Wi-Fi capabilities to those during the course of this year. When you look at some of the early results from that, in our indoor solutions, we've got several trials in that regard. When we turned that small cell on, we saw a 15% increase in the voice traffic in that same geographic area, and we served an incremental 50,000 data sessions every day. We did the same thing in an outdoor area. We saw a 17% increase in that voice traffic and a 30,000 incremental data sessions being done in that particular geographic area. So, as you can see, I'm very energized. So how does a farm girl from rural Kansas show up being a part of a team that's driving this kind of technology and driving this kind of innovation in the world? When I heard about the 5% being in the top 5% of the class, I was at the top 5% of the class. Of course, that was only 2 of us because there were only 18 in my graduating class, and I was salutatorian because I've got a B in driver's ed. But I'll be in a black car if you just give me a little bit of room. We'll be good. So I thought, okay, so who are some influential women in STEM that we could focus on, or I could use as some examples as we talked about this? And I found the person that I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about. And her name was Elizabeth Lamarx. And she was so influential, I could not find a picture of her. She was a native Hungarian. She had a doctorate in human physiology, and she migrated to the US, and she settled in California. And she taught at Westlake High School in Beverly Hills, and she ran across this young lady who was much more interested in tennis than she was in academics, and she spotted her, and she built a relationship and kindled a friendship with that individual, and that individual was Sally Ride. Sally was our first woman in space. She's the youngest astronaut to ever have gone into space, and she's not only a famous astronaut, but she's an accomplished astrophysicist and a PhD from Stanford in 1977. In her book, To Space and Back, she dedicated that to Dr. Lamarx. And when she passed away at age 61, in noting her impact on history, President Obama had said, "She inspired generations of young girls to reach for the stars and later fought tirelessly to help them get there by advocating for a greater focus on science and math in our schools. Sally's life showed us that there are no limits to what we can achieve." And we recognize Brian today for that same sort of contribution and that same sort of impact, living that legacy from Dr. Momartz. So as I kind of step back and reflect on the journey over the last 30 plus years, there were probably three key areas that I wanted to sort of emphasize in terms of the opportunity. Number one, you can never stop learning. You look at what I talked about over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of what we've implemented and deployed and what we're going to implement and deploy over the next 4 or 5 years, you can never stop learning. When I started with a telephone company, we had something that hung on the wall, and that was your communications. And oh, by the way, it had a rotary dial on it. At least it didn't have the cranks. Come on, I'm not quite that age. And then you look at just what's happened over the last 12 years in terms of where we were in wireless penetration and where we are now in terms of that impact. So you've got to constantly be adjusting, learning, adapting, reacting. Take your experience and your knowledge and applying it and projecting it forward to that next challenge and that next opportunity. The second area that I want to emphasize is to get involved. You're not going to learn every skill you need to know in the classroom, and you're not going to learn every skill you need to know on your job every day. For Sally, part of hers was tennis. I'm sure she learned a lot about competition and how to bring yourself back into it. For me, it was basketball. That teaming, learning how to team with people, learning how to anticipate both the offense and defense. Also music. If you can stand in front of a congregation and play that little lip in the Hallelujah chorus on your trumpet when the choir all stops and you got those 16th notes you got to play, you can stand in front of a group like this and give a speech, right? Okay, so learning those, taking your avocation, those things that you find fun and interesting, and using them to enhance your vocation. Learning leadership, learning public speaking capabilities, learning communication skills, learning teamwork, using those avocations to build your vocation. And then finally, find a mentor and be a mentor. For Sally, it was Dr. Momartz. One of my early mentors was Mrs. Rinne. My mother was an elementary school teacher, and I had her 4 out of my first 6 years, so in the second grade. I had to learn how to call her Mrs. Rinne. And because she was both a mother and a teacher, she had some, interesting motivation tools that some of the mothers in this room doesn't have. Like giving me a C in U.S. history in the 5th grade because I wasn't applying myself. It worked. That was the only C I ever got in my academic career, and as you can tell, I'm almost over. And so she gave me a hunger and a desire to learn and to do that research on my own. When you come home and your mother's been your teacher all day and you have a question about your homework, she's probably not going to answer it. So you might have to go research and figure it out on your own. So she gave me that passion and desire to learn. My father, who gave me that passion to understand how everything worked. He made me rotate the tires on the car. He made me take the chain off my bicycle and figure out how to lubricate all that stuff inside. Just gave me a passion and a desire to just understand how things work. And throughout my career, in college, Dr. Sherwood, I thought I was going to teach math, just like Brian, and I wanted to do that so that I could coach volleyball and basketball for women in high school. So that was my plan. So he calls me up one afternoon, I graded papers for him, and he said, "I scheduled an interview for you this afternoon with a company called Southwestern Bell Telephone. I just think you need the interview experience." So I showed up in blue jeans and a t-shirt and white socks. In that day, that's not acceptable. Today, it is sort of acceptable if you're applying for a job in Silicon Valley or in Plano or something like that. But I'd still ditch the white socks. But anyway, so So that's why I showed up for the interview, and Dr. Sherwood had that influence. And over my years, both bosses and peers and people outside the business, sometimes those mentors are just as important as the ones inside the business, because when you're telling them about an issue and you've articulated that and explained it, suddenly you can see how, hey, I'm getting wound up and upset about something that's not all that important. So find those mentors, find those people who push you out of your comfort zone, who challenge you, who listen to you, and who encourage you. And then be a mentor. It's never too early to do that. These women who are doing the mentoring from UTD, my hat is off to you. It shows a leadership and it shows a focus that is just awesome. And I'm very, very proud of you for doing that. It's never too early in your career or in your school system to be a part of that and to take that on. And so hopefully I've given you a little bit of insight about what drives AT&T, as well as encouraging you to continue what this organization is already doing and developing STEM capabilities for that future generation of Kris Rinnes that are driving that next set of technologies. Thank you very much.